Hey guys, today we are going to learn the quadratic formula. It will be the final method that we have for solving our quadratic. So at this point you're going to have graphing, you're going to have square root, you're going to have factoring, you're going to have completing the square, and now you're going to have the quadratic formula. So you'll end up having all 5 of them. Okay, the quadratic formula, it can be used anytime. Okay, so you really could use it for any problem. However, it's not always the most efficient way to do the problems. Okay, it's best when your A is not 1, okay, and it's not factorable, because really factoring should be quicker. Okay, completing the square, give or take, if you get it down pretty well, that can be pretty quick as well. But then we've got the quadratic formula. Pretty much it's going to be done in the calculator once you get the pieces in the right spots. Okay, so what our quadratic formula is it's x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So it is a long formula. Okay, it is one that you're going to want to memorize. I know for right now you don't have to because you get to use your notes, but moving forward into next year and the years after that, you are going to want to have this memorized. Okay, so the sooner you can start to do that and get yourself familiar with it, the better off you're going to be. Okay, so make sure you have your calculators handy, because once we get the numbers in the right spots, it's really just going to be put into the calculator. Okay, and that's probably the part where I see the most mistakes, is kids not being very careful and focused when they put it in the calculator. So make sure that you are. Make sure you're not distracted by other things that are going on around you. Okay, so let's kind of go ahead and see how we put this in, kind of how we get the numbers and the pieces that we need. Okay, so this is the first one that you guys have. Now, first thing you have to do is it has to be set equal to 0. If it's not set equal to 0, then you cannot plug it in the quadratic formula. Okay, so I'm going to subtract the 21 to the other side, so it gets set equal to 0. Now, once you've done that, now you can get your A, B, and C. Remember, A is the number that's with your x squared, B is the number with your x, and C is the number by itself. Do not put the x's in the calculator. It is just the coefficients, okay, which means just the numbers. Okay, so that means for this one, my A would be 1, because there's technically a 1 there. Okay, my B would be negative 4. You have to keep the sign with it. And my C would be negative 21. If you need to write them out like that, then do it. If you can just kind of do it from the equation itself, that's fine with me. Whatever works best for you. Okay, so now it's just a matter of putting it in, okay, and being able to put it in the calculator. Okay, so it's a negative b. So right now my b is negative 4. Okay, but negative and negative is going to give me a positive. Okay, so it'll always have the opposite sign of that one since it's a negative b. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. Okay, so I want to do negative 4 squared. There's 2 ways you can do this. Okay, you can just do it in your head. Negative 4 squared is 16 and put down 16. If you want to put in the calculator, make sure it's in parentheses, because you have to square the whole negative if you're just going to put it in like that. Minus 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is negative 21. And then it's all over 2 times A, which is 1. Okay, so we're going to put this in the calculator. Now, you have to be careful when you put it in the calculator. There's no plus minus sign in the calculator. Okay, so just like before when we had it, you're just going to have to put it in 2 times, or I'm going to talk about a shortcut there is as well. Okay, so say the first time you just put it in with the positive. Okay, so in the calculator, you have to have the big fraction bar. And you'll do 4 plus square root. Go ahead and put all of that in under your square root. Move down to the denominator and put that in. And again, it needs to look exactly like this. Okay, when you put that in, you should end up with 7. Okay, if you don't end up with 7, plug it in again. Okay, you're just going to have to keep practicing on it until you end up getting it in there correctly, since I'm not there to double check it for you. Okay. So after you've done that, and to save yourself a little time so you don't have to sit there and plug it in every single time, if you hit second enter, it will actually bring up what you just typed in. Okay, so then you can arrow back and change your plus to a minus and keep everything else the same. Hit enter and you should end up with -3, okay, as the other answer. Okay, so kind of a little shortcut so you don't have to sit there and type it in 2 times by itself. Okay, but that's the quadratic formula. It then gave you your 2 answers, okay, and you would be done with the problem. Okay. Alright, so you notice this one has a lot of decimals. That's okay. Quadratic formula works with decimals as well. Okay, so this one's already set equal to 0, so this would be my A, B, and C. Okay, so we want to go ahead and plug it in. So it'll be -b. So my B is 0.7, so it'll be -0.7 plus or minus B squared, so it'd be 0.7 squared. Minus 4 times A times C. All over 2 times the A. Okay, so again, just have to kind of get used to that and then plug it in. If you do end up getting the incorrect answer, check your positive, negative signs. A lot of times that's where mistakes are made. If it tells you you have an error, that means that you have a sign wrong on the inside of your square root. Okay, so again, you just got to be very, very careful that everything gets typed in the correct way with the correct signs and everything else. Okay, so again, you would put this in the calculator, put it in with the plus first. Okay, this one you are going to have to round. When you have to round, we can go ahead and round to hundredths. Okay, and you'll end up with -4.83. And I did not double check these. I probably should have, so hopefully they are correct here. Okay, and then the next one, it would be 144.83. Okay. So again, put them in the calculator and come up with those. All right. And then one more like this, and then we have one other thing to talk about today. Okay, this one's not set equal to 0, so that's the first thing we need to do is subtract the 1. This would be my A, my B, and my C. So then we can go ahead and put it in. So it would be -b, which would be -13, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times A times C. And that would all be over 2 times A. Okay, again, you can go ahead and put it in the first time with the plus, okay, second time with the minus, and you should end up with 0.07 and -2.67 as your 2 answers. Okay, again, if it don't get those, then you want to just double check you did your positive, negatives, all that type of stuff correctly. Okay, so that sums up the quadratic formula. Then the last thing we have to talk about is discriminant. Now, all the discriminant does is it tells us how many solutions we're looking for. Okay, it's telling you if you're going to have 1 solution, 2 solutions, or no solution to the problem. Now, the discriminant is part of the quadratic formula. It's just not the entire piece. Okay, the discriminant is just b squared minus 4ac. So it's essentially what's under the square root without the square root. That's considered our discriminant. Okay, and like I said, our discriminant gives us the number of solutions. Okay, so you're going to have three different options. Okay, so if your discriminant is a positive number, so whatever it might be, but if it is any positive number, that guarantees you will have two solutions to that equation. If it is 0, that guarantees you have one solution. And if your discriminant is negative, that tells you that you have no solution. Okay, so the discriminant can be a quick way to say how many answers am I looking for. Okay, and that will become important as you get more complex quadratic formulas once you get to Algebra 2. Okay, so we'll just do a couple of these real quick. Again, make sure you got that calculator still handy for you. Alright, so you'll notice the directions say find the number of real number solutions of each equation. So essentially you want to find the discriminant. Okay, so we still number letter them the same way, A, B, and C. Okay, but again, the discriminant is just b squared minus 4ac. Okay, so b squared would be negative 12 squared. Again, has to be in parentheses. Okay, when you put it in, 4 times a times c. Okay, and then you just put that in the calculator just like this. Okay, and you end up seeing what it is. In this case, you should end up with 12 as your discriminant. So this would be considered the discriminant. Okay, if my discriminant is 12, which is a positive number, that tells me that I will have two solutions to this problem. Okay, so 12 is the discriminant. I have two solutions because it is a positive number. Okay, same idea here on the next one. We do b squared minus 4 times a times c. Okay, put that in the calculator just like that. This one you should end up with negative 55. It's a negative discriminant, which tells me that this one will have no solution. Okay, so again, it's just kind of a quick way to be able to know how many am I even looking for in this problem. All right, so again, that wraps up all of our methods. Okay, so you should have 5 methods now. Hopefully you are fairly comfortable with all of them. We'll start throwing them all together here where you kind of have to pick and choose, and we'll talk about that in a couple days. So otherwise, have a great day.